My father looked me dead in the eyes and told me to get out of his house. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't hesitate. He pointed at the front door and said, "We don't need you here, Ruby. We never did." I was 31 years old. I had been sending money home every single month for 9 years. My name was on the emergency contact form at his doctor's office. I was the one who paid to fix the roof 2 summers ago. I was the one who drove 4 hours every holiday because nobody else would make the trip. And he pointed at that door like I was a stranger who had wandered in off the street. I picked up my bags. I did not cry. I did not beg. I walked out. 20 minutes after I got in my car, I made 3 phone calls. By the time I reached the highway, every card connected to accounts I had been quietly funding for the last 4 years stopped working. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted to punish anyone, because when someone tells you they don't need you, the only honest thing you can do is believe them. What happened in that house and what happened in the weeks after is a story I never thought I would tell out loud. But I think some of you need to hear it, because I spent 9 years convincing myself that love meant absorbing whatever people threw at me and calling it patience. It took one sentence from my own father to finally make me understand the difference between loyalty and being used. This is my story. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. Think about the last time someone you loved made you feel like a burden. Think about the last time you gave everything you had and the response you got back was silence or criticism or dismissal. Think about whether you stayed and why. I am not here to judge the answer. I stayed for 9 years. But I want you to sit with that question while you listen to what happened to me, because at some point in this story, you're going to ask yourself what you would have done differently. Stay with me until the end. The part that matters most is not the moment I left. It is what I found out after I did. My name is Ruby, and I grew up in a house where love was something you had to earn every single day. My father's name is Gerald. He is a tall man with a loud voice and very strong opinions about how things should be done. My mother passed away when I was 14, and after that, it was just Gerald, my older brother Damon, my younger sister Priya, and me. Gerald remarried 6 years later. Her name is Wanda. She came with 2 kids of her own, a son named Tyler and a daughter named Brina. And just like that, our house doubled in size and I became invisible. I want to be careful here because I am not going to tell you that Wanda was a monster, or that Tyler and Brina were cruel, or that Gerald was evil. People are rarely that simple. What I can tell you is what happened, what was said, what was paid, and what was never once acknowledged. I will let you decide what it adds up to. From the moment Wanda moved in, I could feel the shift. It was small at first. The way Gerald looked at her kids when they walked into a room versus the way he looked at me, it was not a dramatic difference. It was quiet, like the difference between a light that is on and a light that is dimmed. Wanda's children got the bright version. Damon, Priya, and I got whatever was left over. I was 17 when I first started working. It was just a weekend job at a bakery near our school, nothing serious, just something to give me a little independence. But within 2 months, Gerald had borrowed $200 from me. He said it was temporary. He said he would pay it back next week. He did not pay it back. I did not bring it up again because I told myself it was just $200 and he was my father and that was fine. That was the first lesson I should have paid attention to, the one that told me the money would always flow in one direction in this family. By the time I was 22, I had graduated college on a partial scholarship and a mountain of loans I paid myself, moved to a city 3 hours from home, and found a real job with a real salary in healthcare administration. I was not rich, but I was responsible. I budgeted carefully, I paid my loans every month, and I felt for the first time like I was building something solid. Then Gerald called. He told me things were tight at home. He said Wanda's car had broken down and they needed help covering the repairs. He gave me the number. It was $940. I had just gotten my first real paycheck. I sent it. I told myself this was what family did. What I did not know then, and what would take me years to fully understand, was that this call was not an emergency. It was an audition. Gerald was testing a system. He was learning that if he framed a request the right way, Ruby would say yes. And once he knew that, the calls never really stopped. For the next 9 years, I gave in ways that were asked and in ways that were assumed. I covered the electric bill one winter when Gerald said it had gotten behind. I paid for Brina's prom dress because Wanda said they were stretched thin that month. I bought groceries and had them delivered to the house when Priya texted me that the fridge was empty. I sent Tyler money for a car deposit that he never paid back and never mentioned again. I paid 2 months of the mortgage when Gerald said the bank was threatening to move forward with something he called a notice of default, which I later found out was not even at the stage he had described. None of this was secret, all of it was real. I have every transfer, every receipt, every bank notification saved. I have always been the kind of person who keeps records, not because I plan to use them, just because I am organized and I do not like uncertainty. I had no idea how important that habit would become. Here is what I did not have. I did not have a single birthday card from Gerald in 6 years. I did not have one phone call that started with "How are you doing, Ruby?" I did not have one holiday dinner where I sat at the main table instead of being handed a plate to take wherever I could find space. When I drove those 4 hours home for Thanksgiving, I cooked, I cleaned, I washed dishes. And I drove home alone the next morning while Gerald and Wanda and their kids stayed up watching movies in the living room like one complete and happy family. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself that not everybody expresses love the same way and that Gerald grew up hard and that Wanda was not my enemy and that family was complicated and that this was just how things were. I was not fine. I was funding a household that did not fully consider me a member of it. The cracks started showing more clearly about 3 years before everything fell apart. I had just gotten a promotion at work, a significant one. My salary jumped considerably, and I was managing a larger team and taking on more responsibility. I was proud of myself. I called home to share the news. Gerald's response was to ask if this meant I could finally help them refinance something on the house. I said I needed to think about it. He said, Ruby, this family has always supported you. It would be nice if you remembered that. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment after he said that. Supported me? I tried to remember a specific example. I could not find one that did not involve me being the one extending support in the first place. But I said okay. I told him I would look into it, and I did because I had not yet learned to trust what I felt. Around that same time, I started noticing something about the family group chat. Gerald had created it a few years earlier, a chat that included him, Wanda, Damon, Priya, Tyler, Brina, and a couple of aunts and cousins on Wanda's side. I was in it. I had always assumed I was in it. But one evening I was talking to my cousin Adela, my mother's niece, and she mentioned something about a message Gerald had sent about a family trip they were planning. A beach trip. She said she had seen photos from it. I had never heard about a beach trip. I scrolled back through the group chat on my phone. I could not find any mention of it. I thought maybe I had missed it, so I asked Adela to send me the post. She sent me a screenshot. It was a different chat, a chat I was not in. It included Gerald, Wanda, both their sets of kids, the aunts on Wanda's side, and even Tyler's girlfriend. There was no Ruby in that chat. There was a whole separate version of this family that gathered and planned and laughed together, and I was not a part of it. I want to stop here and tell you what that felt like because I think it is important. It was not a sharp pain. It was more like suddenly understanding a math equation that had never made sense before. All the years of feeling slightly off balance, all the holidays where I felt like a guest rather than a daughter, all the moments where I laughed too loud trying to fit in, all of it suddenly had a cleaner explanation. I was not imagining it, there was a structure here. And in that structure, I was the person who paid, not the person who belonged. I took a screenshot of what Adela sent me. I saved it in a folder I kept on my laptop that I called simply Documents. It was a habit, keep records. I did not know what I was keeping them for yet. I did not say anything to Gerald about the secret chat. I kept my distance emotionally for a few months while I processed what I had learned. During that time, I made a decision. I was going to slowly, quietly, carefully stop being the financial safety net for this household, not in an angry way, not with a confrontation, just the way you slowly stop watering a plant you have finally accepted you cannot keep alive. I would let things taper. I would redirect my money toward my own future. I would still be present. I would still be kind. But I was going to stop volunteering myself as a resource for people who did not include me in a beach trip. That plan lasted about 6 weeks. Then Gerald called again. This time it was about the property taxes on the house. He said they were significantly behind, and if they were not paid, the county could place a lien. He gave me a number. It was just under $4,000. I remember staring at my phone and feeling something unfamiliar in my chest. Not sadness, not even anger, something more like exhaustion, the deep cellular kind. The kind that makes even breathing feel like a small effort. I asked him a question I had never asked before. I said, Dad, do you know how much I have sent home over the last few years? There was a silence. Then he said, Ruby, this is not the time to keep score. I said, I am not keeping score, I am asking if you know. He said he did not have the exact number, but that he appreciated everything I did for the family. I asked if he could tell me one specific thing I had done, one moment where he felt I had gone above and beyond. I was not being sarcastic. I genuinely wanted to know if any of it had registered. He told me I was being dramatic. He told me this was why things were always tense when I came home. He said I made everything about myself. Then he told me to think about whether I was going to help with the taxes or not and to let him know. I paid the taxes because the house was partly my mother's house, because Priya was still living there, because I was not ready to let it go yet, but I paid them with something different in my chest that had not been there before. I started meeting with a financial advisor around that time. Her name was Camille. She was sharp and no nonsense, and she listened to me describe my situation without judgment. When I finished, she looked at her notes for a moment and then she said something I have not forgotten. She said, Ruby, you are not a daughter in this financial equation. You are a lender who has never been repaid and never will be because the relationship has not been structured as one where repayment is expected. The question is not whether to help your family. The question is whether you are going to do it consciously from now on, or whether you are going to keep doing it by default. Consciously, that word landed differently than I expected. I had been giving because I could not figure out how to say no without losing something I was not sure I ever actually had. Camille helped me understand that the version of belonging I was buying was not real, and I could spend the rest of my working life paying for it without it ever becoming real. Over the next several months, Camille and I restructured my finances completely. We looked at what I had been sending home on average each year. We mapped it out. Over 9 years, accounting for all the lump sums, the monthly contributions, the emergency requests, the holiday deliveries, the car deposit that was never returned, and a handful of other things I had half forgotten, the total that had moved from my accounts to my family was not small. I will not say the exact number here, but I will say it was enough to have bought myself a home. It was enough to have fully funded a retirement account for decades. It was enough that when Camille placed the total in front of me, I had to stand up and walk to the window of her office and look outside for a while before I could respond. She gave me time. When I turned back around, she said, "Now, what do you want to do going forward?" I told her I wanted to set a hard boundary. I would handle my own finances from that point forward as a priority. Anything I gave family would come from a separate, smaller account that I would fund monthly with a fixed amount. That amount would be the ceiling, not the floor. When it was gone, it was gone. No exceptions, no emergency top-ups, no middle-of-the-night transfers because someone's bill was past due. Camille helped me set this up. She also helped me understand what accounts I needed to separate and restructure so that nothing in my primary banking was directly accessible to family members in ways I had allowed before. You see, some years back, I had made myself a joint account holder on one of Gerald's accounts to make it easier to transfer money quickly during emergencies. That was going to change. I notified Gerald that going forward I would be sending a monthly amount and that I needed to step back from larger one-time requests. I kept my message brief and warm. I did not explain everything. I simply said my own financial picture was changing and I needed to be more structured. He responded with 3 words. He said, "Okay, understood, fine." Fine's 3 words that told me nothing. For about 2 months, things were quiet. The monthly amount I sent was less than what he had been accustomed to receiving from me, and I could tell from the tone of the occasional call that this had been noticed. But no one said anything directly. Then Priya called me. She asked if everything was okay. She said Gerald had mentioned I was going through something. She asked in a genuinely concerned way, and I appreciated it because Priya has always been the person in this family who I felt closest to, the one who asked how I was doing without needing something from me first. I told her I was fine. I told her I was just recalibrating and that I was okay. Then she said something that cracked something open inside me. She said, "Ruby, I have to tell you something. I have been sitting on this for a while and I don't know if I should say it, but I think you deserve to know." I told her to say it. She told me that for the last several years, at least since she had been old enough to notice, Wanda had been telling Gerald that I sent money not because I cared about the family, but because I wanted to control them. That I used money as a way to make myself feel superior. That the reason I stayed away and sent checks instead of coming home more often was because I looked down on all of them. Wanda had been constructing a version of Ruby that was generous on the surface and cold underneath. And according to Priya, Gerald had been listening. I asked Priya how long she had known this. She said about 2 years. I asked why she was telling me now. She said because the other week at dinner, Gerald had said something that scared her. He had said in front of everyone that he was tired of Ruby's money coming with invisible strings, and that someday he was going to tell me exactly how he felt. I thanked Priya. I kept my voice steady. I told her I loved her. Then I hung up and I sat in my apartment in total silence for a very long time. So this was the shape of it. I had spent 9 years sending money and making drives and cooking dinners and fixing roofs and paying taxes, and during all that time, the woman who had taken my mother's place in that house had been quietly poisoning the way my father saw me, and my father had let her. He had taken the narrative and worn it like a coat, and now he was warm and comfortable inside a story where I was the villain, the generous but controlling daughter. The one who sent checks to make herself feel important, the one with invisible strings. I thought about the beach trip Chit I was not in. I thought about every birthday that passed without a call. I thought about every holiday where I was handed a plate and pointed toward a corner. I thought about Camille's word, consciously. I made a decision. I was not going to confront anyone yet. I was going to wait. I was going to see how the new structure played out. And I was going to keep my records because I had a feeling, deep and quiet, that the moment of confrontation was coming whether I chose it or not. Gerald had said he was going to tell me how he felt someday. I wanted to be ready when someday arrived. It arrived on a Saturday morning in March. I had driven home because Priya had called and said Gerald was not feeling well and asked if I could come. I want to be clear about this detail because it matters. I drove 4 hours because my sister called and said our father needed someone. I did not go for credit. I did not go to be seen. I went because Priya asked, and because somewhere under everything I still loved my father even though he had made that very complicated. When I arrived, Gerald was fine. He was sitting in the kitchen looking entirely healthy, eating toast and watching the news. The sickness had apparently passed. Wanda was at the kitchen table with him. Tyler and Brina were in the living room. Damon was not there. I said hello, I put my bag down, I asked Gerald how he was feeling. He told me he was fine. There was a pause that felt different from other pauses, loaded, like something had already been decided before I walked in. Then Gerald put down his toast and looked at me and said he wanted to talk. I said okay. He said he had been thinking for a long time and that he was tired of feeling like I treated this family like a charity project. He said Wanda had helped him see that the way I gave money was not generosity, it was manipulation. He said he did not need my money and never had. He said he wanted me to know that this family was doing fine and had always been doing fine and that my help was never as necessary as I seemed to think. I stayed quiet, I let him finish. He finished by saying that maybe it would be better for everyone if I stopped treating every visit like an inspection. He said I made the people in this house uncomfortable. He said I had always made them uncomfortable. I waited to see if he was done. Then he pointed at the front door and said, "We don't need you here, Ruby, we never did." And there it was, the thing Priya had warned me was coming, clean and direct and certain, said in front of Wanda who did not move, said in fro. NT of the house I had helped keep standing for almost a decade, said with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment and felt fully supported in it. I looked at my father for a moment. I did not cry, I did not argue. I thought about 9 years. I thought about the roof, the taxes, the car deposit, the electricity, the groceries, the drives, the holiday dinners, the birthday cards I sent that were never returned, the secret beach trip, the chat I was not in. I picked up my bags, I said, "Okay, Dad," and I walked out. I sat in my car for a few minutes in their driveway. I was not frozen, I was not panicking, I was thinking very clearly, which surprised me a little. I felt something I had not expected, not devastation, not rage, relief, like a window had just opened in a room that had been sealed shut for a very long time. Then I picked up my phone and I made 3 calls. The first call was to my bank. I removed myself from the joint account I had been sharing with Gerald for 4 years, the account that had a healthy balance because I had been contributing to it automatically each month as the family's emergency buffer. My contribution, my removal, done. The second call was to the service provider linked to the family's cable, internet, and streaming subscriptions. I had set all of these up years ago under my name and credit card because Gerald's credit had not been in good standing at the time. They were still in my name. I canceled them all effective immediately. The third call was to my bank again, this time to stop the automatic monthly transfer I had been sending. It was set up as a standing instruction. I gave them the instruction to halt it. Done. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway. I was maybe 20 minutes down the highway when my phone started ringing. First it was Brina, I let it go to voicemail, then it was Tyler, voicemail, then Wanda calling from her cell, voicemail, then Gerald. I answered Gerald's call. He said the cards were not working. I said I know. He said there must be some kind of mistake. I said there is no mistake, Dad. He said what did I think I was doing? I said you told me you don't need me, I believed you, I removed myself. There was a silence that lasted several seconds. Then he said I could not just do that. I said I could because every account, every subscription, every automatic transfer had been set up by me in my name with my money. There was no legal obligation I was walking away from. I was simply stopping something I had been doing voluntarily. He said this was not right. I said, Dad, you pointed at the door and told me to leave. I left, that is what you asked for. He hung up. Over the next hour and a half of driving, my phone received 22 additional calls and messages from various members of that household and extended family. Tyler said I was being spiteful. Brina said I was punishing everyone because of my issues with my dad. Wanda sent me a message that said I had always had a vindictive streak and now everyone could see it. A cousin on Wanda's side that I had met twice in my life sent me a long message about family loyalty that used the word shameful 4 times. I pulled off the highway at a rest stop and I sat quietly. I read through every message once. Then I set my phone down, got a coffee from the vending machine, and drove the rest of the way home in silence. When I got home, I sent one message to the family group chat, the one I was actually in. I wrote, I have removed myself from the financial arrangements I had in place for the household. Dad asked me to leave today. I respected that. I wish everyone well. I did not use dramatic language. I did not explain. I did not list what I had given. I just said what had happened. Then I opened my laptop and sent an email to Camille. I told her what had happened. I told her I had made the 3 calls. I told her I was home and I was steady. I asked if we could meet that week. She replied within the hour. She said yes. She also said in that direct way of hers, "Good, now we protect you." I did not sleep much that night, not because I was upset, because my mind was very active in a way that felt more like preparation than distress. I spent most of the night going through the folder on my laptop called Documents. I had been adding to it for 2 years without any clear purpose. Now I looked at it with new eyes. There were bank transfer records going back 7 years, confirmation receipts for payments I had made on behalf of the household, screenshots of text messages where Gerald or Wanda had asked for money and I had confirmed I would send it, the screenshot from Adela showing the beach trip group chat I had not been included in, a record of the mortgage payment I had made, the property tax receipt with my name on it. A photo I had taken of a birthday card I had sent Gerald that was returned to sender because the address had apparently been updated and no one had told me. I organized everything chronologically. I made a summary document, not because I was planning to sue anyone, not because I was building a case in the dramatic sense, but because I understood that I had been gaslit for years into believing I was controlling and manipulative, and I wanted the truth written down somewhere clean and clear so that I would never let myself forget what actually happened. Priya called me the following morning. She sounded shaken. She said the house had been in chaos since the evening before. She said Gerald had not slept. She said Wanda was furious. She said Tyler had tried to call the bank and been told there was nothing they could do because all the accounts and subscriptions were in my name alone. I asked Priya how she was doing. She said she was okay. She said she wanted me to know she did not agree with what had happened. She said she loved me. I said I loved her too. Then she said something that I had not expected. She said she wanted to come stay with me for a while. She said she had been thinking about moving out and that this situation had made her realize she needed to do it sooner rather than later. She was 24 and she had a job in the city and she had been waiting for the right time. She said maybe the right time was now. I told her my couch was hers. While Priya was figuring out her next move, I began receiving a different category of messages. These came not from family members, but from older relatives, specifically two aunts on my father's side of the family who had always been peripheral figures to me. They had heard what happened, not from me. From Gerald, who had apparently made several calls to relatives explaining that I had cut off the family financially out of spite. One aunt, Aunt Rosalie, left me a voicemail that was 7 minutes long. She talked about the importance of forgiveness. She talked about how Gerald had always done his best. She said my mother would be heartbroken to see me behaving this way. She said the word selfish 11 times. I know because I counted. I kept the voicemail. I did not call her back. The other aunt, Aunt Vera, sent a short message. It said, "Ruby, I raised Gerald. I know him better than most. I want to hear your side. Call me when you are ready." I called Aunt Vera. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, there was a silence, and then she said something that made me feel for the first time in days that I was not losing my mind. She said, "Ruby, I have watched your father take from the people who love him since he was young. I had hoped he had changed. I am sorry he has not, and I am sorry you carried this as long as you did." I thanked her. I cried for the first time since any of this had started, not the loud kind of crying, just the quiet kind where the tears come out and you let them because there is finally enough space to feel what you have been holding. Aunt Vera also told me something I had not known. She said that when my mother passed away, she had left a small life insurance policy, not a large amount but meaningful. She had always assumed the money had gone into savings for my education. Then one day, years later, Gerald had mentioned something in passing that made Aunt Vera realize the money had been used in the first year after my mother's death, well before I ever started working or sending money home. Aunt Vera had always wondered where it went. She had never confronted Gerald about it because she had no proof and it had been so long, but she said it had always sat in the back of her mind. I hung up with Aunt Vera and I sat very still for a while. Then I pulled up my laptop and I wrote down everything she had told me. I added it to the documents folder. Then I made an appointment with an estate attorney. Not because I expected to recover anything. The policy was old and whatever happened to that money was long past any legal remedy, but because I wanted to understand whether there was anything in writing, any record, any documentation of what my mother had intended. I wanted to know for myself, not for a court. Just for the record, I was building in my own mind about who this man was and what the last 17 years of my life had actually looked like. The attorney's name was Mr. Acaffer. He was methodical and kind and did not waste words. He told me that without documentation of the policy and without a named beneficiary designation that could be traced, it would be difficult to establish much. But he said something else that opened a new line of thought entirely. He asked me whether the home I had been contributing to was in my name or my father's name. I said my father's. He asked whether I had any documentation of my contributions toward the property, specifically the mortgage payments and the property tax payment. I said I did. He told me that in some circumstances, when a person has made sustained docu Mented contributions toward a property they do not legally own, there may be avenues to explore regarding equitable interest. He said he was not promising anything. He said every situation was different. But he said if I wanted to, I could bring my documentation to a follow-up meeting and he would look at it carefully. I brought my documentation, every page of it. Mr. Acaffer spent 2 weeks reviewing everything. When we met again, he told me that while the situation was complex and nothing was guaranteed, there was a reasonable enough foundation to send a formal letter to Gerald documenting my contributions over the years and requesting acknowledgement. The letter was not a lawsuit. It was not a threat. It was a record of facts, professionally assembled, delivered by an attorney that said in clean legal language, "Here is what Ruby gave, here is the documentation, here is what Ruby is asking you to acknowledge." The letter went out on a Thursday. By Saturday, Gerald had called me 4 times. I did not answer. He texted me and said the letter had scared Wanda. He said their own lawyer had looked at it and said it was something they needed to take seriously. He said we needed to talk. I texted back one line, "My attorney will be in touch." What happened next is something I did not engineer and did not expect. Damon called me. My older brother, who had been almost entirely absent from the financial drama for years and had said very little when everything fell apart, called me. He asked if I was really talking to a lawyer. I said yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he had something to tell me and he needed to say it in person. We met at a coffee shop halfway between his apartment and mine. Damon is 4 years older than me and he has always been careful about what he says. He does not talk much. He watches, he listens. When he told me what he had been watching and listening to for the last few years, I understood why he had called. Damon told me that Wanda had been moving money, not stealing exactly, at least not in a way that was simple to explain. But over the years, she had developed a habit of accessing funds in ways that were not entirely straightforward. He said he had seen her use Gerald's accounts in ways that did not add up. He said he had noticed that some of the emergencies Gerald called me about, the ones that required urgent large transfers, had often occurred not long after Wanda had made purchases or payments he could not account for. He had not said anything for years because he had no solid proof and because he did not want to blow up the family. But now that the situation had escalated and there was an attorney involved, he said he thought I deserved to know what he had observed. I pulled out my phone, I pulled up the documents folder, I showed Damon my records, I walked him through the timeline of every large request and transfer. He looked at my phone for a long time, then he looked up at me and said, "Ruby, these dates match up." I asked him to be specific. He was specific. 3 of the largest emergency requests Gerald had made to me over the years, including the property tax payment that had felt so wrong when I made it, had occurred within 2 to 4 weeks of a large outgoing transaction on Gerald's account that Damon had personally witnessed Wanda processing. Not proof of wrongdoing in any legal sense, not without a deeper look at the accounts, but a pattern that was far too consistent to be coincidence. I brought this to Mr. Acaffer. He said he could note it in the context of our documentation, but that without access to Gerald and Wanda's account records, there was no way to build it further without litigation, which I was not interested in pursuing. He said what we did have was still significant. He said the letter had done its job. He said if Gerald and Wanda wanted to avoid a formal claim of equitable interest on the property, they would likely want to come to some kind of acknowledgement or resolution. They did want to avoid it. 2 weeks after the letter was delivered, Gerald's attorney reached out to Mr. Acaffer. They proposed a meeting. Gerald, through his attorney, offered to sign a formal acknowledgement of my contributions to the household. He offered a repayment agreement for a portion of what I had given structured over time, not the full amount, not even close to it, but a portion in writing with legal weight. Mr. Acaffer brought it to me. He told me what it would and would not cover. He told me it was not justice in the full sense. He told me it was something. I took it not because it made everything even, not because I felt avenged, but because having my father's signature on a document that said, yes, Ruby gave this money, yes, this money was real, yes, we received it and we are acknowledging it, was worth more to me emotionally than the dollar amount on the page. For 9 years I had been told that what I gave came with invisible strings, that I gave for control, that I gave to feel superior. A signed document said otherwise. A signed document said this was real and we know it. I did not tell anyone what was in the document. I did not post about it. I did not announce it to the family group chat. Aunt Vera knew because she had been the one person who had spoken honestly to me throughout all of it and I trusted her. Priya knew the broad shape of it because she had been living with me by then and had seen me going back and forth with Mr. Acaffer. Everyone else heard nothing from me. What they heard from Gerald's side I cannot fully account for. Wanda, from what Priya told me, had gone very quiet since the letter arrived. Tyler had apparently stopped asking me for things, which was a change I noticed in my phone notifications. Brina had unfollowed me on social media, which honestly felt more like relief than loss. The cousin who had sent me the message with the word shameful written 4 times sent me another message about 6 weeks after the agreement was signed. It said she had heard what had really happened. She said she was sorry for what she had written. I read it once and did not reply, not to be cruel, just because I was no longer spending my energy in that direction. The month after the agreement, I did something I had been putting off for almost 3 years. I signed the lease on an apartment I had been wanting for a long time, more space. A second bedroom that could be a proper office, a neighborhood I actually wanted to live in. I had delayed it for years because I kept redirecting money toward the family. Now there was no redirection. The money I had been sending, the portion that was now going into my own future, made the numbers work easily. Easily. Which told me something about how much I had been giving away. I bought myself a couch. A real one, not the second-hand one I had been living with for years. I filled my kitchen with things I liked. I took a weekend trip to visit a friend in another city, something I had canceled twice before because Gerald had called with something urgent. I went this time. It was 4 days of ordinary happiness, of sitting in a cafe and talking and laughing and sleeping and doing nothing in particular. It was the first time in years I had gone somewhere without a phone alert pulling me back to that house. I want to tell you what I learned in the quiet that followed all of this. Because the story is not really about the money, though the money is important and real, and I want to honor the fact that it was significant. The story is about something harder to name. I spent 9 years loving a version of my father that I was constructing out of hope. Every time he let me down, I built a new version in my head that might do better next time. Every time the money went and no thanks came, I told myself he showed love differently. Every time I was left out of a gathering or ignored on a birthday, I told myself I was too sensitive. I bent myself into the shape of someone this family could use without it looking like use, and I called it love because I did not yet have the right word for what it actually was. The right word is compliance. I was compliant. I was not loving. I was compliant. I kept the peace by absorbing the damage. I kept the connection by paying for it. And as long as I was paying, the connection held. The moment I stopped, they told me I was never needed, which actually meant we needed your money, and without it, we have nothing to offer you. That is not family. That is a transaction you were not fully informed you were part of. I think about Wanda's story about me, the one about invisible strings, the one about control, the one that my father believed and repeated until he felt confident enough to point at the door. And I understand something about it now that I could not have seen from inside the situation. When someone is benefiting from your generosity and does not want to feel obligated or grateful, the easiest thing they can do is reframe your generosity as selfishness. If you're controlling, then they are not ungrateful. If you give to feel superior, then they are not taking without returning. The narrative protects the behavior. Wanda needed a story in which I was the problem, and Gerald needed to believe it because the alternative, that he had been allowing his daughter to fund his household while treating her as an outsider, was a truth too uncomfortable to hold. That is not me saying I was perfect. I was not. There were moments where I held back my feelings in ways that probably came out sideways. There were probably moments where my presence in that house carried the weight of unspoken scorekeeping even when I tried not to let it. I am human, but the ledger between us was never close to balanced. And when I finally let the numbers be real, when I stopped pretending that love was the explanation for a structure that was actually extraction, everything became very clear. Very quickly. Priya has been in her own apartment for 3 months now. She is doing well. She has a life that belongs to her, and she sounds lighter every time we talk. We speak more now than we ever did when we were both orbiting that house. She told me recently that she feels like she is meeting me as a real person for the first time now that the old family dynamic is not shaping every conversation. I said I felt the same. Damon and I have coffee sometimes. He is careful and quiet, and I do not think he has fully processed everything he witnessed in that house over the years. But he showed up for me when it mattered, and I hold that. Gerald and I have not spoken since the phone call on the highway where I told him I had removed myself. His attorney communicated with my attorney. The agreement was signed. That is the whole of our contact in the last several months. I do not know if we will speak again. I do not know what that conversation would even look like. I know that I am not going to reach out to repair something that he broke deliberately and without apparent regret. If he ever reaches a place where he wants to speak honestly, I will be reachable, but I am not waiting by the phone. Wanda has not reached out. I did not expect her to. Aunt Vera and I have lunch once a month. She is in her 70s and she is sharp and funny, and she knew my mother when they were both young women. She tells me things about my mother that nobody else can tell me anymore. I treasure those lunches more than I know how to say. The documents folder on my laptop is still there. I have not deleted it, not because I am holding on to the past, but because it is the most honest record I have of a chapter of my life that I spent a long time telling myself differently. It is real, it happened, and I earned the right to know it clearly. I am not angry anymore. That surprised me most of all. I thought when everything finally came apart I would feel a rage that needed somewhere to go, but the anger burned off quickly once the truth had space to breathe. What I feel now is something quieter and more solid, something like having both feet on actual ground for the first time. Someone asked me recently, a friend who knows the shape of what happened, whether I feel sad about my father, whether I grieve the relationship. I said yes, genuinely yes. I grieve the father I believed he could be. I grieve the family I spent 9 years trying to build with my money and my presence and my labor. I grieve my mother who left when I was 14 and left a space that no one in that house ever tried to fill for me. I grieve the younger version of me who kept sending money and driving 4 hours and showing up to holidays where she was handed a plate and pointed to a corner, because she believed that if she just kept giving, eventually someone would turn around and see her. They saw her, they just saw someone useful, not someone irreplaceable, not someone loved. The difference between those two things is something I now understand with every part of me. If you're listening to this and you recognize something in my story, not the specific facts, but the feeling of giving into a space that keeps asking for more and giving nothing back, I want to say something to you that I needed someone to say to me years earlier. Your generosity is not the problem. Your loyalty is not the problem. Your love is not the problem. The problem is the structure you are operating inside, a structure where your giving has been normalized and your needs have been made invisible. That structure did not build itself by accident, someone built it. And the fact that you keep showing up inside it does not mean you are weak, it means you are still hoping. But hope without honesty is just a longer way to the same ending. The ending is better when you choose it. Mine is still being written, but for the first time in a very long time, I am the one holding the pen. If this story made you feel something, I want to know what it was. Was it the moment in the driveway, the phone call on the highway, the part about the beach trip Chet she was not in, the signed document, something about what she said at the end? Leave it in the comments, because the reason these stories matter is not the drama of what happened. It is the recognition, the moment you hear something that sounds exactly like your own life in someone else's voice. If you found that moment today, tell me what it was. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story right now, send it to them. You might be sending it at exactly the right time.